sins will be forgiven, and I believe my choice will save me from this life. Please don't question why.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I've got a new video for you to go over the early attempts at biological warfare by the British. So we will cover from the time of America's inception all the way up to World War I, and we will show all of the suspicious and or proven instances of bioterrorism by the British against America, against Australia, possibly Ireland, and of course they also had infiltrated the British had infiltrated the German biological sabotage program to kind of beef it up to make it more costly for the Americans. So we'll get into that. But first I would like to say that I have a new part of my website. I have a new page up on my website for my guest appearances on various, podcasts or shows, and I just posted my appearance with Ricky Varandas on the Ripple Effect. So that is up there now, and there's a few other ones. Of course, I have my appearance with Bruce DeTorres from on his show The World Stage, and also let's see, I also put my Trine Day appearance up as well, and I will just keep adding them as they go. So I have one appearance that I'm doing this Saturday, and then next week I have an appearance with Courtney Turner. That'll be a great time. I know we'll have a lot to talk about, and I'm not going to say it now, but I think I may have an appearance line. I may have a possible appearance with somebody who is very well known in the media, and so I'm really excited about that. I hope that works out, and I'm just gonna keep trying to land as many appearances as I can on various podcasts and shows and whatnot. So it is well underway. So let's get right into this. Oh, in 1760, we have the first instance of a proven biological warfare attack on the Delaware tribe from the British. During this happened at Fort Pitt during Pontiac's Rebellion, 1763, and there was a trading company, Levy Trenton Company, and they had recorded the infected blankets, and it was billed to the British Crown. So it was being billed as an attack. Like, we're going to use this as a weapon, and then also the same thing. They did the same exact thing down in Australia, and you're going to find a pattern of attacking both countries at once, where they will carry out simultaneous attacks with various agents on America and Australia. And they did that. They used smallpox to attack the Native Americans, but they also used smallpox to attack the Aborigines in Australia. And the next instance we have of early biological warfare was 1775. And it's actually the first American president, George Washington, talking about the British using smallpox as a weapon. And it was in a paper by Elizabeth Fenn, Biological Warfare in 18th Century North America beyond Jeffrey Amherst. And the quote from that paper is this: "The smallpox rages all over the town," wrote George Washington from his headquarters in nearby Cambridge on December 14th. "Such of the British military as it had not before are now under inoculation. This I apprehend is a weapon of defense they are using against us." In fact, Washington already suspected that the British, in an effort to infect the vulnerable Continental Army, had inoculated some of the refugees leaving the city. On December 3rd, 1775, four deserters had arrived at the American headquarters, giving an account that several persons are to be sent out of Boston this evening or tomorrow that have been lately inoculated with the smallpox, with design, probably, to spread the infection in order to distress us as much as possible. It was, according to Washington's aide-de-camp, an unheard of diabolical scheme. Washington at first regarded the report with disbelief. "There is one part of the information that I can hardly give credit to," he wrote. "A sailor says that a number of these coming out have been inoculated with design of spreading the smallpox through this country in camp." So, very, very interesting that we have the first American president quoted on the British using smallpox as a biological weapon. But it's, that's what's in the records. That's what the records show. And then the next suspicious event we have linked to the British, or at least very suspicious and looks like it could be a British biological weapon attack, is the Irish potato famine in the 1850s, where they used potato blight, or where potato blight caused the Irish potato famine. And potato blight, which is a fungus called Phytophthora infestans, that's the scientific name, was later used as a biological warfare agent by the British. That's why I bring this up, because they probably were using it earlier. I mean, who knows of all the different attacks that they've carried out that have gone completely unnoticed. But this is one where I say, we can't link it with certainty, but it looks suspicious given their history of using these kinds of things as weapons, and especially economic weapons. And so they had been in conflict with Ireland just prior to that potato famine, and they sent minimal assistance to Ireland during that time when they were in a position to do so. And then not long or around the same time frame, they carried out attacks on the United States and Australia with contagious bovine pleuropneumonia, which is the agent's name is Mycoplasma mycoides. It's a really nasty one that causes pneumonia in the livestock. And it talked about how the British sailed over here on a ship called the SS George Washington, ironically, and they claimed that the cow that they brought along to furnish milk and food for the crew had gone dry, so they traded it. And I'll read the quote. It's actually, so it was during a USDA conference in 1955, and they were talking about this incident that occurred around the 1850s. About 100 years ago, a British vessel with the name of George Washington docked in the port of New York, almost opposite the window of our office at Broadway. On the ship were some cattle which had been brought along to furnish milk and food for the crew members and passengers. The particular cow that furnished the milk had gone dry, so that the master of the vessel proceeded to take the cow off the ship to a rural district then known as the Bowery, where he traded this cow for a fresh cow. This transaction being done, he returned to the ship and sailed away. The cow he traded, however, was infected with contagious pleural pneumonia, which spread rapidly over the United States, particularly the eastern seaboard and as west as Ohio. And for a number of years, this particular disease was the scourge of the infant livestock industry in the United States. And so they did the exact same thing down in Australia within years apart. So what you see is a pattern here, that they do these simultaneous attacks on Australia and the United States, and they use these schemes like trading this cow that they know is infected, and then they sail away, and then they say, "Oh, we didn't know it was infected." That's always the way the game is played. It's always doing it in ways that they can plausibly deny and say, "We didn't know. It was, an act of nature. The cow was sick. We didn't know." So then, once they can always plausibly deny something, it causes conflict for the nation that's been attacked, because they're like, well, what if they really did not know? And so that's like why biological warfare is so favored, is because it causes that, because it's you can blame it on nature so easily, and they can't link it for sure, aside from being let in on the plan. And that's what makes this, that's what's made this kind of warfare so desirable. And now next we're going to talk about so there was all of this back and forth antagonism that I talk about in the first chapter, where British intelligence had infected livestock and horses being shipped to Germany, and then Germany thought that it was an attack by the Americans. So it fomented a lot of antagonism, and of course this just continued to escalate up to the years of World War I, when Britain wanted America on her side against Germany. So it seems that British intelligence went around causing all this trouble between America and Germany with these false flag antagonistic attacks, right? So that it would drum up, resentment and antagonism between those two countries, and she wanted America on her side against Germany. So it was very Machiavellian, but that's what they did. And so there's all these like horses and cattle being sent to Germany that show up all diseased, and Germany's talking about stopping all the shipments and putting a ban into effect to ban the importation of horses and cattle from the United States. And it was funny because as that was happening, Britain was publicly making these statements that, oh, the Americans have all these diseased livestock. They're the source of foot and mouth disease. And it was actually, at the time, only being found from animals being shipped from Britain. So they were shipping us infected animals, but then they were making these public statements that the Americans all have diseased animals, don't buy from them. So it was very, and don't forget what caused the formation of America to begin with. British corruption, right? And so they were continuously attacking us over, from the beginning of the United States in the 1700s. And by World War II, John Loftus had told me was that his sources were saying that back then they saw, or the American intelligence saw Britain as the biggest threat to national security even before Nazi Germany. And with all I lay out in these first few chapters, it's certainly understandable why that would be. Most people would find that hard to believe, but when you read all of these other instances, all of this antagonism and this Machiavellianism and bioterrorism, it makes complete sense. And the next thing we want to talk about here is the German sabotage program of 1915 and how British intelligence had infiltrated that, and it seems to be with this guy, Captain Erich von Steinmetz, who he was very aloof compared to the other German saboteurs, right? And he travels through enemy territory, Russia. He travels from Romania through enemy territory, through Russia and Siberia, and then he takes a steamer boat to San Francisco, and then he takes a train across the United States, shows up at the German saboteur coordinator's house, Walter Scheel, who was supposed to be working only on explosives. He wasn't doing the bacterial sabotage. And this guy shows up at his doorstep with a battered suitcase full of germs that he claimed to have hand carried all the way from Romania. Tells him that he traveled through Russia and all that, and he doesn't trust the guy. Tells him to get out, and they have a heated argument, and he knocks him out. I'll even read. It's pretty funny. Says, when Steinmetz first showed up in New York, he traveled at once to the German representative's office at 60 Broadway. When Steinmetz first shows up in New York, he traveled at once to the German representative's office at 60 Broadway, where he was directed to take his suitcase to Scheel's lab in Hoboken. But now that Scheel had discovered what was inside the baggage, he told Steinmetz to get out. When the naval captain protested, after a violent altercation, I struck Steinmetz in the face and knocked him down, and put him out of the office with his germs, reported Scheel. Later he described Steinmetz as a scoundrel of the lowest order. And so, yeah, I don't think he would be saying that if the guy was actually a German saboteur. I think he was saying that because the guy seemed like a plant. He didn't trust the guy, and he clearly wasn't operating in the same manner that the other saboteurs were operating. And so he was probably a British agent. And I'm thinking he probably went that route because to grab that new variant of glanders that Britain may have been testing in Rangoon, because that's where melioidosis shows up. That melioidosis is that variant of glanders that has a much longer incubation period, and they call it the Vietnamese time bomb, because it can remain latent for a long time before erupting into an active infection. And this would be desirable if they were going around infecting these horses that were then going to be used to turn out serum and vaccines, because you want the biological agents to remain latent for long enough so that they don't think there's anything wrong with the horses that they're using, so then they can get that into the humans eventually as an indirect attack on the humans. And Eric, what I didn't mention in my last video about Erich von Steinmetz is that he can be placed at the Rockefeller Institute So he was going around trying to infect their animals, and then he noticed that the horses weren't showing any signs of disease. He probably didn't know anything about it, and he goes and he boldly goes into the Rockefeller Institute and asks them to take a look at it. He tells them that he's a researcher and asks them to take a look at his germs, and says, you know, are my cultures dead or whatever? And they told him that they were inactive, and I'm thinking this was melioidosis, and I think he was a British agent. I mean, he could have been a Russian double agent, but I think more likely he was a British double agent. And what is interesting is that Britain had all of this research that they were conducting in the years leading up to the 1918 influenza, where they were doing research on the combination of bacterial pneumonia and viral influenza. And that's, of course, what happened in the 1918 influenza. The virus comes through and takes out the immune system, and then the person ends up getting a bacterial pneumonia that kills them. And it's very suspicious, and I know that John Loftus had talked about, I included a quote where John Loftus is saying, you know, based on what his sources have said, that Soviet intelligence thought that the Spanish influenza, or the 1918 influenza, was a British biological weapon that was developed from an avian virus. And let's see if I can. There's a passage that I'll read. Okay, here. Russian intelligence learned that British scientists had discovered and isolated the coronavirus in their Portendown laboratories as early as 1904. The Russians suspected, albeit without hard proof, that the British had then developed an avian virus that was the real source of the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918, which killed many millions of Russians. So they thought it was a British biological weapon, and actually it might have been. I mean, there's definitely evidence that would lean in that direction. Or at least, you know, maybe they weren't necessarily trying to start a worldwide pandemic, but that they were trying to make the German sabotage program more costly and things spun out of control. That's another possibility. But at any rate, it would still mean that it may have still been a biological weapon. Maybe they didn't mean for it to turn into a full-scale pandemic like that, but maybe they did. Who knows? So this guy Steinmetz, I think, is where... I mean, we know that British intelligence had infiltrated the sabotage program through other people as well, but I'm thinking, as far as the biological sabotage, I think this guy Steinmetz is a very suspicious character. Especially, because he was carrying germs that were not being used by any of the other German saboteurs, like foot and mouth disease virus, for example, and that's a British virus. Foot and mouth disease shows up in Britain first, basically. They probably started developing it as an economic weapon, just like contagious bovine pleural pneumonia. And Steinmetz is also in possession of tetanus, and he's also in possession of some form of glanders, which I'm thinking is the melioidosis. And they also said that he was in possession of meningococci. So he is, for sure, a very suspicious guy when it comes to these questions on just how extensive was British biological warfare. Even in the German sabotage program, where we're thinking it was, German attacks that may have been British attacks that were kind of, carried out under the guise of being part of the German sabotage program. So that's pretty much it, I think. One more thing. So the 1918 influenza reaches America. So it looks like there may have been several tests run in this whole 1918 influenza. What's interesting is a month before the 1918 influenza surfaces in America, a ship comes over from Britain, a naval fleet, comes and docks in Philadelphia, and they all die of this nasty pneumonia where they turn blue, just like what happens in the Spanish influenza, but they thought that it didn't spread. And the crew members died a horrible death, and seems like, it fits that pattern of how they attack. They come over, they dock, and they unload infected, crew members or cattle. And what is also interesting is that the 1918 influenza also reached Australia through the British on ships, and it was ships coming from I think it was the British-controlled areas of the Philippines. So it was British-controlled areas or directly from Britain, in the case of America. I mean, it's just really suspicious, you know what I mean? So, of course, all of this is talked about in the first few chapters of my book. And, of course, I go into it in much more depth. I don't want to try to give, everything away. But clearly, the British were far more into this, and they have the earliest history of using it, and so they definitely understood the value of germ weapons before anybody else. So that is it, and with that said, everybody take care of yourself, be yourself, build yourself, and I will see you on the other side.
Oh.